On the 2nd of June 1953, the world rejoiced on the coronation of a new queen. 7 decades on, it's almost impossible to imagine that there was a time when she may have not even taken up the mantle of monarch.
The coronation of the Queen was a huge and very significant affair. It was a 3-hour ceremony. It was, everybody recalls, the coldest June day that had ever happened, and it was pouring with rain. The army was enormous. Every sort of foot or 2 feet along the pavement, there was what they call street liners, which were soldiers, and they were all really cold, and they were given sugar lumps infused with brandy to sort of keep them going. And the ceremony itself was very, very serious and very religious and very dramatic. We won't ever have a ceremony quite like that again.
She never intended to become queen. But everything changed from the age of 10, when her uncle, Edward VIII, abdicated and created the greatest British crisis in centuries.
I don't believe that Princess Elizabeth was really aware of what it meant when her Uncle David, she called him, abdicated. She knew something happened because everyone was in a terrible state, and she knew eventually that they would have to move house, and she knew that her father would be king and her mother would be queen, but I don't think the actual real sort of dimensions of her situation, she was too young to understand that.
The line of succession to the throne was then taken by King George VI, Elizabeth's father. Her father reigned for 15 years, then died in 1952, 7 years after the end of World War II. They maintained an extremely close relationship, and this was a perfect example of a happy childhood.
Princess Elizabeth was very close to her father. Always was. I mean, he absolutely adored Margot, Princess Margaret, and Margaret made him laugh, but he was very proud of Elizabeth. And he saw that sense of duty. He spotted it very early on, and he knew that she would be just the sort of queen that the country needed. And he tried to do as much with her as he could, because of course there was the war years took up a great chunk of her so-called childhood. He didn't actually spend a huge amount of his life with his daughters, but whenever he could, he did. And he taught her to shoot. He took her duck flighting. He did kind of boyish things with her, because he had 2 daughters. And he was just so proud of her. So I think they were, especially for the time, they were a very close family. We may not think that now, viewing them from our era, but then they were a close family.
She was very much an unlikely queen. Neither father nor daughter were prepared to become the monarch. She went from an aristocratic life to suddenly being put in the spotlight.
She was very, very shy. She wasn't a great conversationalist. In fact, she didn't really have the necessary attributes to enter this, world of men, but she had this extraordinary dedication to duty. She was determined that she was going to do it right, and she had no training. She just did what her father did. And that kind of, in a way, suited her character, because she could learn as she went along, but without doing anything extraordinary. So she just did dutifully, really, what she was told most of her life. And I think it was really only in her latter years that we saw the essence of the Queen's character. We saw her humour, we saw her laughter, we saw her acerbic wit. It was always there, but she belonged to an era where public persona had to be completely straight. So we never saw that side of her, so we assumed that she was very dull and boring. But she wasn't, but she was very shy, and it had been drilled into her that you mustn't show emotion in public.
It is important to note that at this time, if Elizabeth had a brother, he would have taken up the throne before Elizabeth. Before 2013, the succession rules followed male preference primogeniture, which meant that sons have priority over daughters. But from 2013, this was now made to be absolute primogeniture, which now simply follows birth order. Elizabeth was only 25 years of age when she came to the throne, upon the death of her father in 1952.
When Princess Elizabeth received the news of the death of her father, she went into shock, as you would. I mean, she was shocked by his death because she thought he was getting better. Everybody within the family thought the king was getting better. He was at Sandringham, he'd been out shooting, he'd had a wonderful day, he was with friends, and as Princess Margaret said much later in an interview, he died just as he was getting well. But of course he wasn't really getting well, they thought he was. So it was a huge shock to her. And it meant the end of her life as she knew it. She had 2 little children, a naval husband. They just started out, really, on their married life. And they just moved into Clarence House, which was their first real home. He was going to be posted to Malta. Their life looked really rosy, and suddenly, basically, it ended.
She reigned over England for a record-breaking 70 years and 214 days, officially the longest reigning monarch in British history, and saw massive change to the world. She married Philip Mountbatten in 1947. Together, they had 4 children: Charles, Anne, Andrew, and Edward. She became Queen Regnant of 32 sovereign states during her lifetime, and only 15 at the time of her death. Elizabeth was served by more than 170 prime ministers. She has been on many historic visits and meetings that have included state visits to China in 1986, to Russia in 1994, and to the Republic of Ireland in 2011. She also had meetings with 5 popes. Her coronation took place in 1953. She has lived on to celebrate her silver, golden, diamond, and platinum jubilees in 1977, 2002, 2012, and 2022. Though Queen Elizabeth II was the perfect example of a role model, her husband, Philip, showed a keen interest in voluntary services and in the Royal Navy. This meant that as their 4 children grew, they had extremely loving parents throughout their childhood.
She very rarely confided in anybody. She was a very complete person.
So let me just now repeat that statement from the royal household, which we have received in the last few minutes. It reads: "The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow." And so the reign of Elizabeth II comes to a close after 70 years at the age of 96. Her son Charles is now king.